U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is in China this week, meeting with senior Chinese officials in an effort to ease tensions. Now, the two sides reaching an agreement told regular discussions about export restrictions and also intellectual property.
The United States is committed to being transparent about our export control enforcement strategy. I want to be clear, we are not compromising or negotiating in matters of national security, period. But this is meant to be a dialogue where we increase transparency and where we are clear about what we are doing as it relates to export control enforcement. And by the way, to show you how real this is, the first meeting of that new information exchange is tomorrow in Beijing.
Joining us now, we want to bring in Ryan Heath, Axios global tech correspondent. Ryan, it's good to see you here. So we have some of these headlines coming out of China today, opening up lines of communication. We know, obviously, there's been this tit-for-tat escalation of tensions between the U.S. and China now for quite some time. How encouraged should U.S. chip makers be, should investors be, about the fact that we are likely going to see more communication between the two sides?
Mildly encouraged is probably the best description there. If you are a business that has long-range investments, and that's what all chip making and design is about, then you need certainty. So the more transparency, the more dialogue, the better for you as a chip maker. At the same time, while this isn't precisely true for every different type of chip, we need to be clear that U.S. exports to China are still basically at record levels, and that also includes for some forms of chips. So all of the discussion is around what controls are being put into place, what might not be able to be sold in the future, but the broad environment is still reasonably encouraging. And so it's just worthwhile keeping a bit of that in mind as we work through all of this.
To what extent do you think the Commerce Secretary's visit to China could go far in trying to dial down some of this tension that we have seen escalate from U.S. measures on export controls, China retaliating in some way? I mean, transparency and dialogue are great, but if you're both dialing up the pressure, how much of that temperature can come down?
Yeah. So we're not talking about dialing down the temperature 100 degrees. We're talking, can we dial it down 5 degrees? Can we leave a bit more space for negotiation and discussion in the future? But I do think that sort of mood music is really important. Like, there has been relatively little contact between the administrations for quite a while now. There is tension at the diplomatic level, which is supposed to be the nicest space for discussion. So to have Raimondo there, who is an extremely safe pair of hands, who is extremely well regarded by the White House, who is treated as a serious player by the people she is talking to in Beijing, that's exactly the right person that you want there having these discussions. It doesn't guarantee any outcomes in the future, but it gives you a solid basis for having a more functional relationship, for knowing there is someone who will pick up the phone if there's a new problem that we can't anticipate right now. And that ultimately is the point of this sort of diplomacy, is you want people to pick up your call when it's urgent.
So step in the right direction. But Ryan, what are some of these tough decisions that U.S. chip makers are being forced to make today? Because yes, while this is maybe slightly encouraging, like you're saying, there's still so much uncertainty, I should say, given the fact that tensions have remained high for so long. And these chip makers can't exactly wait around to see what the relationship's going to look like in 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, exactly. And we're starting to see other effects in the market as well. It's not just about what you can and can't sell to China. It's other countries placing orders in case they become subject to a future export control. They also want to make sure, so for example, if you're in the Middle East and you've got a ton of cash that you can splash out on NVIDIA chips, why not stockpile them and then sell them later to the Chinese? That's creating all sorts of ripple effects in these markets. And those begin with, what production lines are you going to run in the US at your new chip factories, or what ones are you going to build using all of this new CHIPS Act money that is coming down the pipeline in 23 and 24, through to those global effects, and in the sense of which markets are actually going to remain functional export markets into the future. And then further on down the line, if sanctions are coming into place, then you've got to think about whether you get implicated in sanctions, depending on how you have set up your contracting. So there are 3-4 layers of effects here that all of these companies are having to think through at the moment.